Today on the Men at the Movies podcast, we dive into the romantic comedy The Holiday to try to uncover the mysteries of the feminine heart. If, as Irenaeus sort of says, the glory of God is woman fully alive, how can we avoid a toxic masculinity and create a safe environment for her to become wholehearted? Join us as we discover God's truth in this movie.
The movies and stories we love are gateways to see ourselves and God in new ways.
Every great story borrows its power from a larger story, the story that's written on our hearts and woven into the fabric of our very being. Hello and welcome to the Men at the Movies podcast. My name is Paul McDonald, and joining me via Zoom down in Hotlanta is Britt Mooney. Hey, buddy.
What's up? It's not quite hot today, but it is really nice. It's beautiful outside.
So we're talking about the movie from 2006 called The Holiday with Cameron Diaz, Jack Black, Jude Law, and Kate Winslet. And our big question, I'm actually going to answer this one.
Okay,
I'll give the first answer. Why did we pick this movie? Well, I was talking about this podcast at work. I teach nursing students, and so we were at the hospital, and I was talking about what I do here on the podcast and talk about Men at the Movies. And so she started saying, well, what does this tell about me, that my favorite movie is The Holiday? And I said, I have no idea because I've never seen it. But so I started talking to her about it, and when you start talking about these things, it's interesting because you enter into some fairly vulnerable, possibly intimate space that like I wasn't that comfortable. This is one of my students. So I was like, I really don't want to talk about what this right. reveals about your heart, because that's not a safe space. And I think that's actually, we see a little bit of that in the movie.
Yeah.
But then I brought it up. Hey dude, what do you think about The Holiday? And you of course said, I've seen it. We've seen it. We love that movie, because every movie I ever bring up, I seen that movie. I love that movie.
I haven't seen Meat yet. I haven't seen
That's
Meat
right.
Yet. There's a couple I haven't seen.
So then now I'll flip it over to you. And when I brought it up and you were excited about it, why were you excited about this movie?
Well, I'm a strange guy in the sense that I do like chick flicks. I do like romantic comedies, especially if they're good, right? It's a very small subset of the genre. It is a smaller subset of the genre, but I do enjoy chick flicks and I enjoy those sort of romantic comedies. And this is one that my wife and I have seen. And it is one of the few, as I was saying before we started recording, that my wife will actually rewatch. She is not a person who likes to rewatch a movie. Like there will be times I'm like, oh, this movie was awesome, let's watch it. And she goes, I don't want to see it again. But there are a few movies that she wants to watch again. And this is one of them. And so we saw it in the theater. And so there's sort of that nostalgia about it for us, that this is something that helps us to connect, and we laugh, and there's the travel aspect to it that I think we both like, that they go to someplace new and discover like a new land and kind of new place.
That's kind of your jam.
We were both missionaries. We both love to travel. And I really do feel like there are some great themes in here, especially with the Iris story, of love and looking for Wookin Panub in all the wrong places.
Yes.
There really is some great themes here in her story particularly. I think there's some in Amanda's too, but with her relationship with Arthur and what she learns through that, I think there's just a lot of really cool things. And I think it's going to help us, like you said, learn what it is about women that they long for. As men, leadership can't be about what I want. Leadership, as I think I've said before, Leadership is about helping the other person become who they were created to be. And so for us as men, even though we may or may not like these types of movies, it will reveal to us how to lead people and how to connect with their hearts and lead them in a way that satisfies what they're longing for. And so, yeah, that's why we picked it.
And I think that's a pretty good summation because, yeah, this may not be, this is not going to pop up on any top 100 list of movies men love.
The Dirty Dozen, The Holiday.
Yeah, right after Terminator 2, just ahead of Schindler's List. Wow, that's a that's a big jump in genre and mood. But what we see is if this is a movie that is fairly universally beloved by women, and every time I said, yeah, we're watching The Holiday or we're going to do The Holiday, almost every woman that I told that to said, oh my gosh, I love that movie. And so if we get this, to me, it's like The Wizard of Oz. We're getting a look behind the curtain because women and women's hearts are a mystery.
Right.
And before we go, because we will be sort of making some assertions and saying this is how we're interpreting this. And this is dangerous territory for two men to be saying, well, this is how women think. And this is what it says about their heart. And we're not really, we're basing it on not our own machismo and testosterone and patriarchal stuff, but we're basing it on the Bible, what the Bible says about our genders and some of the stuff that we've done in reading and our experience. And, because both of us are married, both of us have daughters, and it, for no other reason is I want to understand them better.
Yeah.
And I want to know what makes them tick. And to your point, I want to help them become more fully alive.
Yeah.
The quote from Irenaeus says, the glory of God is a man fully alive. Well, I don't think that's gender specific because the glory of God is a woman who's fully alive as well.
Yep.
We want to see how we can do that. How can we create that environment? Because what we see is at the beginning of the movie is it's a movie really about two women and really three men. And the women are Iris and Amanda, who are broken. They are not fully alive. They are, in the first scenes that we introduce them for Amanda, she's kicking out her boyfriend for cheating on her. And he's yelling at her because she's consistently putting work first. They haven't had sex in, he doesn't remember how long. And she even says, well, who has time for sex?
He's like, people do.
Yeah. That's kind of a big deal with romantics, and we're not commenting on the morality of the movie.
Right.
So, go with us here, but she wants to write her own story. She wrote the ending of their relationship before it had even started. And because interestingly enough, she writes trailers for a living.
That's right.
The interesting thing about that is how they pull that in as she's going along and she's living her life. There's a trailer about, she shows up. Amanda Woods was not waiting for love, but it knocked on her door. So she is, and we'll find out during the movie, because she's shut out love. She is all about work. That's where her validation comes from. That's where her joy comes from. As she says, she doesn't have time for sex or romance or love or affection or anything. And so love quickly goes out the door. And on the other hand, we've got Iris, who is from London. She is a journalist. And she, on the other hand, is all about love. She narrates the very beginning of the story, talking about unrequited love is the worst because she loves somebody who doesn't really love her back. And here we introduce the first man of the movie, Jasper, and you see it. And I think that the acting in this movie is such top notch, regardless of the character. You feel when you're watching Iris, like I wrote down, just like she is desperate. She is aching for his love. She is starved for attention. And you see that on her face as she's going through it, and it's reflected, and it's so good. And and then she can't stop crying. She is the other end of the spectrum of Amanda, of this one who's desperately seeking it, will do anything for it, and will put up with anything, because Jasper is a man, when we talk about, this culture has talked about toxic masculinity. Jasper is kind of the one of the, cover pages, cover boys for that, of he cheated on her when they were dating. And now the girl that he cheated on her with, they're getting engaged. And yet he keeps tagging her, pulling her along.
Yeah.
With hope that they'll someday be together.
Well, yeah, he's a horrible human being. And, but one of her friends, so they're at the Christmas party before the break or whatever. And one of Iris's friends literally says, "I never knew you were this pathetic."
Yeah.
And that sums up where Iris is at the beginning of the movie. We all can.
And she doesn't even argue.
She doesn't even argue with it. She knows she's pathetic. And we all relate to Iris because we've all had a Jasper. We've all had someone that love or whatever the relationship was where, man, they could just snap their fingers and we jump. And even though they would abuse us, even though they actually didn't love us, they're just manipulating us for their own narcissistic amusement, and which is what he's doing. And yet, because she had these insecurities, she felt like she needed to have this validation from another person. And so all of that to say is we relate because we've all had a Jasper, but at the same time, this is the journey that she has to take, that she's pathetic, where this whole movie is a movie of contrast, by the way. I don't know if you noticed this, but from warm LA to cold England, from the pathetic girl who's always crying to the other woman who never cries,
successful, right?
And so there's a whole. It's good writing, by the way. That's good writing. This is you show a lot of contrast based on the same theme of what you're trying to do. Women are
going to associate with one of them,
right? Yeah, great.
Because we've all, and now I'm not. We've all. We being women, but I think we all, men and women, have experienced that hurt.
Oh, sure.
And for Amanda's history, her past, it was when her parents divorced, and she said, "I cried myself to sleep that night and never cried again."
I never cried again. By the way, just to comment on one thing that you said, Paul, for any women listening to this, I would love to hear your input. Like my wife and I talk about this stuff all the time, where I ask her what she's thinking, what she's feeling, what does she wish for, long for, dream. We try to have these conversations, but I would love to hear more input. Like if there's something we're saying that's way off, or you're like, because sometimes I think even women don't know why they love movies. And so I think, and we're doing this podcast because I don't think men understand why they love some movies that they do. So it's not one more than the other. So we love some of that input, but one of the things that women generally long for is a sense of security. And that's a general thing. And Iris, ironically enough, was trying to find her security in a man she couldn't have. Now, stick with me here. But there's a certain level of risk she didn't have to take if it was unrequited, right? Does that make sense? If it's unrequited, there's a certain amount of risk she didn't have. It's safer that way. It's actually safer. It hurts her, but it's safer. Right. Whereas with Amanda, she's going to choose a guy who's going to leave her, because that actually makes her feel safe. She knows the end to that story. She could write the end of that story. I knew this was going to happen. And he's like, you do this all your relationship.
You're the smartest person in the room. You can't see it coming. And I don't even think she really knows that she does it.
Yeah.
It's just her self-protection.
Yeah.
And it makes me, and just to jump on what Amanda, like that character in that situation, because what happened for her, It reminds me of the quote from C.S. Lewis of, to love it all is to be vulnerable.
Yep.
Love anything and your heart will be wrung and possibly broken. If you want to make sure of keeping it intact, you must give it to no one, not even an animal. Wrap it carefully round with hobbies and little luxuries and avoid all entanglements. Lock it up safe in the casket or coffin of your selfishness. But in that casket, safe, dark, motionless, airless, it will change. It will not be broken. It will become unbreakable, impenetrable, irredeemable. To love is to be vulnerable.
Yeah, absolutely. And is to not know sometimes the end of the story, to not,
right.
Which seems unsafe. But that's why these movies are so important, because it seems unsafe that we don't know the end, that we don't know how it all works out necessarily. Like you get the little thing at the, little happy ending at the end, but we don't, like there's a certain level of risk and open-endedness to the end of this movie that women still love. That's my point. And is just like with Lloyd Dobler and Say Anything, he offered a security in the relationship that it didn't matter what actually happened. You know what I mean? And we went over that with Say Anything, and we're going to see a lot of that again here, where the men that were like a redeeming sort of love in both of these characters' lives offered a type of love that was secure in the relational aspect, in the dignifying, valuing of the other person, which meant maybe this could work, even though it seems sort of inconvenient, at the end. Like, that was my main criticism, by the way, a little spoiler alert. Well, the first time I watched the movie, I was like, yeah, but how did they make the long distance stuff work? I don't,
yeah.
But again, women still love this movie because they are, that's their longing, is that there's a security in the fact that this person loves them and sees them. Well, I'm going to go over that later, that they see them,
right?
That they're seen for who they are. And that's the sort of thing that we as men need to think about. Like, how do we help our wives feel seen?
Right. And that's what Stacey Eldredge writes about in Captivating, which is a book describing the feminine heart. And she said, and John Eldredge wrote Wild at Heart, which describes the questions men have. The question men have is, do I have what it takes? And the question that Stacey writes about the feminine heart is, am I lovely? Will you pursue me? Will you delight in me?
Yep.
And what you see is two reactions. And Amanda says, I don't want that. I don't need that. I've got my work. And she locks her heart away. And for Iris, she says, I'm not worth it. I'll do whatever it takes, even if it means putting up with your crap and your toxic relationship and your infidelity, because that's all I'm worth.
That's right.
In their core, they don't basically believe that they're worth it.
Yep.
And they both go through on the same day this shattering event. Amanda's boyfriend cheated on her. She kicked her out. She wanted to get away. Iris found out that the man that she was in love with is getting married.
It's the ultimate insult, by the way. But Iris's job was to write wedding announcements, engagement announcements, and she didn't know. And they're like, "Hey, we got a job for you, Iris. This is an announcement and an engagement." And it's, I wrote added insult to injury. Like,
it was a slap in the face.
And so obviously this is the moment of the movie, whatever the inciting moment of the movie is, they both trade houses because they both need to get away. And this is something we were talking about earlier that I think men need to kind of clue in on, because it's true about my wife, and you can speak to your wife and see if you agree, but my wife needs to get away. My wife needs to go get out of the house. Like, yes, we can have a date on the couch and we can watch a movie and have some food, and that's nice. But a change of scenery is huge for a woman, because in the house, for a woman, it's all about, there's all kind of responsibilities that are just like haunting them like ghosts in the corner, like, oh, this needs to be done in the laundry and that, or whatever.
I'd say that's for men too. I feel
right. And so the fact that they both recognize, I just need to get away. And sometimes it's very hard for women to get away because they feel so much pressure, and for men too, they feel like so much responsibility, and they can't make the time and all that stuff. And my point is, make the time and pull away. We're going to do it here in a week or two, where spring break is coming up. And we're going to go to the cabin. I know I've talked about the cabin before, but my wife loves the cabin because she doesn't feel like she has to clean everything at the cabin. We're going to pay somebody to clean when we leave. But that's for her heart, so she can rest and she can think, and we can connect and enjoy our time together. And women just need that. And men need to understand that sometimes that is worth whatever you pay to get it done.
Man, that's a really good statement that I've heard before, and I'll hit on that here in a second. But what I noticed as Amanda was looking at this home exchange site, because they switch places basically for 2 weeks, it talks about the cottage that Iris lives in it says it's a fairy tale cottage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, and again, treading some dangerous ground here.
Correct us if we're wrong, by the way.
Yes. You can find us on Facebook at Men at the Movies. There's a desire to live in a fairy tale.
Yep.
Or to be a princess. And again, this whole story that Stacy wrote about, of being in a dress and twirling around, wanting her dad to notice her, to see her, to tell her she's lovely, and to delight in her. And that desire, I think, is in there. Again, I'm not a woman. I don't know. But from the stuff that I've seen, and to allow yourself to experience it. And in this case, she was pursuing the fairy tale, Amanda was. And it's funny, she was pursuing it, and Iris came to LA with this giant house. She got to experience it. She's rags to riches sort of thing. And she's in this fabulous house living in Hollywood. But what you said about it's worth the price, the Bible frequently talks about Jesus being the groom and we are the bride.
Mm.
And the extravagant price that he paid to woo us, to bring us to himself. And it's not a challenge, but I remember hearing somebody that said, if we look at our wives the same way,
mm-hmm.
and we say, God, you've put me here to love my wife abundantly, because that's how God loves us, is abundantly. And it's not about buying fantastic jewelry or nice cars or doing this, but it's expressing love in an abundant way of making them feel like a princess, they live in a fairy tale. It's this challenge of not outgiving God, but hey, I took my wife, it was her 50th birthday last year. It was our 10th anniversary. And
Nice.
We took a catamaran around the U.S. Virgin Islands. And it was a little more costly than we anticipated, but I trusted God. It's like, God, I think you're in this. You want me to do something. My wife loves nature. She got to swim with sea turtles and rays. Cool. We went hiking. She loves the water. She loves reading. And it was a perfect experience for her. But it's this idea of inviting, from my perspective, my wife, your daughter, into a fairy tale. And it's a challenge.
Well, even more than that, I would say invite them into an adventure.
Yeah.
Even more than a fairy tale, because fairy tales, sometimes have a certain connotation of fantasy, and that's part of it. I mean, women love that you dress up and it's a night on the town, and it's like it's a rare thing. So there is an element of that can be real, but I think even more than that, what we see in the movie that really speaks to women's hearts is they're going on an adventure, and
you saw Amanda driving in England, and it was terrifying.
Right. Yeah, it was terrifying. And we're all laughing, right? We're laughing at it, watching it, because as they start to explore this is the key. As they start to explore on this adventure, they have to meet people that help them explore. Because just like I said in Say Anything, women want adventure. They just don't want to do it alone. They want to have it in community, which is actually an awesome thing about women, by the way. This is right. Not something that's not in any way putting women down. This is saying this is something women bring to the table to our lives, that life is amazing on adventure, but let's do it in a community. Let's do it as a family. Let's do it. Like sometimes we can be annoyed by that as men because we're like, I'll climb the mountain by myself, at least I can be that way. And men need to have community with other men and all that stuff. But so they each wanted an adventure, and they reached out for that, but they also kind of, there were details that had to happen, but at one point Iris does try to give a little boundary to Jasper, and it fails. And again, we can all relate to this. We have those people that we try to get rid of, but they are just they're going to manipulate us. They're going to have, and it doesn't have to be a romantic thing, but we have those sort of people. And so as you go forward, there's kind of these elements. They're both they're fish out of water stories, which are great stories, right? So they're discovering, and we got a lot of the contrasts. And one of them is LA is movies, England is books, and you got some of these sort of things. But then they meet the guys. Then they kind of run into the meet cute, as Arthur calls it. They both run into the guys.
I guess there's 4 men in this, because I said there was 3, but there's 4 because Arthur. 5 if you include Ethan, but he didn't really last very long.
No, he doesn't.
In England, you've got Graham, who happens to be Iris's brother, shows up in the middle of the night, and I thought it was so interesting because he comes in, and it's Jude Law, and a really great actor, and he comes in and she's like, I'm leaving. I hate it, because what she discovers is she's been so busy, she's never had time to deal with her pain, her loneliness, her wounding. And now that she's there for like 6 hours, she's like, I've already booked a flight. I'm leaving. And he asks her, he says, well, why is it that you are not quite yourself?
Why is it you aren't quite yourself at the moment?
Well, I just broke up with someone yesterday. And I guess what I was feeling was that I didn't want to be alone over the holidays, and I thought that if I was somewhere else that I wouldn't realize that I was alone. But then I got here and I've never felt more alone in my life. Big surprise. Bet you're glad you knocked on this door.
I am, actually.
And I love that his response, because she is already writing the ending. You're regretting knocking on the door. We're doing spoilers here. So they end up having sex because it's like, hey, it's this meaningless thing. You're drunk. I'm lonely. Let's have sex, as probably happens daily around the US. But she even says, I'm not very good at sex. My ex-boyfriend told me this. And these things that she's like, she is preparing him for a disappointment. She's setting the stage for the story. And his response is, you are quickly becoming one of the most interesting girls I've ever met. And I think that attitude is, if we approach the woman in our life, or a woman, as the most interesting person I've ever met.
Yes. That
will sweep them off their feet.
Oh man. So here's one thing I wrote down. And this is the reason why women love romantic comedies. All right. This is one of the reasons, is because you have these moments in these movies that Arthur points out, the meet cute. And both Iris has one with Miles, the Jack Black character, and then Amanda has one with Graham. Women want to be seen, and not just seen, but seen anew. They want to be seen again. So women do want to be known. That's important. But they also want to be discovered anew. They want to have that feeling of something new. And And they can express that in a lot of different ways. But I think for us as men, we have to realize that just because we married them 20 years ago, they're different now.
Yeah.
They're different people. And a strong marriage on both counts for men and women is discovering your spouse again. Learning how to fall in love with them again, because they're different people now. Hopefully they've grown better. But they're different people. And if you don't spend that time rediscovering each other, then you get what people say, we just grew apart. And that's not really what you did. What you really did is you didn't take the time and spend and invest in rediscovering each other along the way, and taking the time. One of the things a guy told me when I was younger and I was single, and I thought all women hated me and I smelled or something. I didn't know what the problem was. Everybody's getting married. And, but I don't know why, but I just started, I'm single. I'm just going to start asking some of these men that I think have either they've been married a long time or I think they have good marriages. I want to ask them, give me one thing. If you could tell me one thing that is, would be good for me to know if I were to ever get married, kind of thing. And one of the guys said, who's a saxophone player, his name was Vinny. And he said, every day I come home from work and before I talk to the kids, before I talk to anything else happens, I sit down and I look my wife in the eyes and I say, how was your day? And tell me about your day. And he said, nothing happens in the rest of the night until that happens. And I filed that away in my brain. And I went, that's amazing. He says, we do that every day. And those are the kind of things that you have to, those sort of disciplines and rhythms you have to get used to. And so I love that about this movie. And I think that's why women like even the Hallmark movies we were making fun of before we started, but they like that too, because it's like, they feel like, oh, I can be discovered again. I can be found interesting again, right. Because they want to feel lovely. They want to feel like one of my favorite parts. They want to feel like the leading lady, but with a lot of the responsibilities and the pressures and the ins and outs of life, it beats them down, man. And so they want to feel that.
There's a way to do that. Like if your friend had come in and been looking on his phone and said, how was your day?
Right.
Looking at his phone, or, all right, I got a bunch of stuff to do. Can you make it quick?
Right.
How was your day?
Right.
And what I saw in that clip, and even with this whole original interaction of Graham, his constant response is, you are delightful.
Yeah.
She didn't feel it. She didn't think it. But that was the message of, you're the most interesting one I've ever met. I don't regret knocking on this door. I'm delighted to meet you. And that's how was your day has to be done of the spirit of delightful investigation almost, of tell me about it. I actually do care about it. And seeing your wife and delighting in her and pursuing her heart. And the weird thing, Iris does meet Miles, Jack Black's character. They have a little chemistry, but he's with somebody. But really, the main love interest, the one who calls her out, is Arthur,
yes.
Who's like 90-something years old, an old screenwriter. And he's the one who brought up the meet cute because she found him wandering by the road. She took him to the house. He's a fascinating dude. I love hanging out with old dudes.
Oh, man.
And just hearing their stories. And so she is intrigued by this man and wants to hear more about him. He's got, Oscars and Emmys and all these awards in his office, and he's a fascinating guy. And so she asks him out to dinner, and they have this very good conversation.
I wanted to get away from one guy, an ex-boyfriend who just got engaged and forgot to tell me. Sorry.
So he's a schmuck.
As a matter of fact, he is a huge schmuck. How did you know?
He lets you go. This is not a hard one to figure out. Iris, in the movies we have leading ladies and we have the best friend. You, I can tell, are leading lady. But for some reason, you're behaving like the best friend.
You're so right. You're supposed to be the leading lady of your own life, for God's sake.
And I think in a lot of ways, Arthur is that invitation of the Holy Spirit in our lives. And you know, for her to be seen.
Yeah.
She's like, I'm the best friend. I'm pathetic. He's like, this guy's a schmuck. It's not a hard thing. This is obvious to anyone with eyes because he left you. He must be a schmuck because only schmucks ditch the leading lady in the movies, right? And he sees her, as we just said, he saw her for who she longed to be.
Yeah. Yeah. There's so many things I love about that scene. Like, and really to me, the most amazing, there's a couple other things I'll point out as we go, but the most amazing part of the movie is her relationship with Arthur, because she says that was really brutal, but I needed to hear it. And that's what truth does. Truth is trying to lead you to the best, but it gets kind of brutal along the way, like the cross, you know, like
a little brutal.
It gets brutal along the way. But Jesus says, if you'll take up your cross and follow me, it might feel brutal, but you're going to get to your best life. You're going to get to the joy you've always longed for. And so he's speaking the truth in love.
Yeah.
Like that's how you speak the truth in love. You call people up.
Yeah.
You don't put people down. Somebody should write that down. That was a really good line. You call people up and you don't put them down. That's how you speak the truth in love. You call them to a higher place. And that's what he does. And she says, I've had years of therapy and they've never said this or whatever. Like I've never gotten to this place with them. And what I wrote down was an older, wise person. A relationship with someone older and wiser is better than therapy. Now, I'm not against therapy. I have children who have gone to therapy. Okay. I'm not against it. But my point is that having someone that you don't have to pay to say this to you, that says, who has lived and they lived a long life. And there's a certain amount of trust and authority that comes with living an old life. And they can look at you and say, I can tell you're a leading lady. And here's what I love about Arthur is Arthur gives her a list of movies to watch.
She did Women at the Movies.
She did Women at the Movies. But here's what I love about it. He says, you really got to check out these movies if you haven't seen them. And she, at some point in the movie, she goes, I've been watching these movies and every one of them has a leading lady with gumption.
Yes.
In other words, he's discipling her. He is speaking to her heart. And this is like almost like a father type role that he's taking in her life. And I love that about Arthur. And there's other parts of the relationship that I love because her redemption comes from reaching out to him. Like she finds the gumption by it not being even about her. Like that's so spiritual to me. Like she finds that gumption that she's supposed to have by ministering to him. Oh, we'll get you there. We'll get you up those stairs. And like, it's about her empowering him. Right.
It flipped because at the end, we're sort of following the Arthur arc very quickly. He had the Screenwriters Guild wanted to celebrate him. And he said, why am I going to want to show up 100 years old using a walker for 11 schmoes who are going to be there? And because of his investment in her, because of the impact that he had on one person, she pulled him, drew him into this recognition and this, I mean, it was a recognition ceremony, dinner, whatever. And he opens the door and there's hundreds of people.
Yeah.
And seeing the impact that he made took the courage of one person. Yeah. Like he doesn't go to that without her.
Right.
And she doesn't encourage him to do that without the gumption that he's kind of called to life. And it's not because he was teaching. He was saying, look at these women, look at these leading women and follow their example.
Look at the story.
Yeah.
And that's what he keeps doing. That's what I love about his character. He's treating her like she's in the middle of a story. You're just in the middle. You're a leading lady. You have a meet cute. There's something, like he keeps pulling her through a story, and that's what God does with us. That's why we do this podcast. That is what he does with us. He's like, no. There's more. But her redemption comes. This is what I wrote down. Her redemption comes through helping someone else, even though it's in a temporary situation. She was going to leave in a few days.
Yeah.
In other words, she was going to get nothing out of this.
Right.
Because it wasn't like she was investing in a relationship because he was her neighbor forever and she just bought the house.
Or she wanted to be put in his will.
Or she wanted to be in the movie. It was literally a completely altruistic event.
Just from the joy of the relationship.
Just from the joy of the relationship. And I'm telling you, that's a spiritual thing. That's what Jesus does. And that's what Jesus calls us to do when we love others, is our redemption is going to come from that generosity where we're out to bless others. And we're going to find the roaring lion or the gumption or whatever God has placed within us is going to come alive. You talked about hearts coming alive, or a man fully or a woman fully. She becomes fully alive by helping this person. And that's what draws her and Miles together, is drawing him into that part of the story. And she gets to see his character, not in a date, not in a, hey, baby, you're so hot, but she gets to see Miles's character through helping this person. And it's something different. Yeah. Jasper's not helping anybody.
No, it's all about what he gets.
He's not really even helping himself. If you really get down to it, he's really hurting himself because it's empty. It's empty what he's after. But I don't want to go too far into the rest of the movie. But
yeah, we've got a clip to play a little while later about Iris and Miles, how she explains her redemption arc, and I think it's really powerful. But we're going to put a pin in that, and we're going to go back to Amanda and Graham. Because remember, she's going to leave. She's like, England sucks. I'm by myself. I'm going to do a quick one night stand. You're going to get out of here. She's making coffee in the morning and he's leaving. And she thinks automatically, because she writes the ending, it's about her. She's not interesting enough. She's not whatever. And so there's this conversation. It's very awkward. Like probably most of us have had in the beginning of the relationships. And
burgeoning, that's a good word.
I like
good
it.
Word, man. It
just came out. It's all this, Jude Law and Kate Winslet, this British side coming out. So they have this conversation in the kitchen the morning after their night.
I just want to be sure you are okay, because somehow I find I tend to hurt women simply by being myself. So
I'm not going to fall in love with you, I promise.
Okay. Nicely put, thank you.
No, it's just that I know myself. I'm not sure I even fall in love. Not like the way other people do. How's that for something to admit?
Well, like I said, most interesting girl award.
I'm gonna try to see that as a compliment.
You should. Absolutely. Okay, then. Well, utter honesty. Very refreshing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, you probably won't be hearing from me because even if you wanted to, and you clearly don't, I have the classic male problem of no follow-through. Absolutely never remember to call after a date. But since this wasn't a date, well, I guess I'm off the hook.
Exactly.
But what if I wanted to call you? Right, sorry. Apparently not the right thing to say at all. Well, if your flight's cancelled or for some reason you change your mind, I'm having dinner with some friends at the pub tonight. And if not, then, well, you're lovely.
So good.
It is. It's despite all that awkwardness, despite all the brush-offs. I am not going to fall in love with you. I promise. And he's like, oh, well, okay. She's brushing him off before she basically rejects him before she can be rejected. And that's her pattern. And yet there's that moment, and then the music starts. He's like, he could have left. Like, she was not giving him, the come hither eyes. She was saying it was the get lost look. And yet he said, if something happens, if your flight gets canceled, if you change your mind, I'll be at the pub. And I'd love to see you. You're lovely.
You're lovely. I love it. And what's so amazing about that is in both cases, for both Miles and with Graham, is there is a pursuit in a certain level, but there's a lot of space and freedom given. It's
not a smothering.
There's not a smothering, and we went over this again with Say Anything, but I think it's important to point out is that this is very loving. This is what God does. God could force us to follow him. He could, like, no ands or buts, right? Ifs, ands, or buts. Like, he could force us to follow him. But what he does is he comes into our world, or we have whatever interaction, and he goes, I just want to be with you. And here's where I'll be. Yeah. And, Miles kind of does some similar things. He's like, I'd love to come to dinner with you and a whole bunch of old guys. Like, you know what I mean? Like there's no pressure to be like some intense romantic thing. There's this, I want more, but I'm definitely not going to force it. And I'm definitely going to let it happen. And I think women long for that freedom, because what it does is it dignifies them. They're not manipulative. Right. They're not aloof either. There's a pursuit, but there's also a freedom that they allow. And I think that's just really important that we kind of dignify all people that way, because community is community because people want to be there. And he's saying, if you don't want to be there, then leave. But if you want to come, I want you there. Right. And I think that's a very sort of loving thing. And one of the things that I think is important about the movie in both Miles and Graham is that you see their character through other relationships that they have. So you see Miles's character, like I already said, with the old guys, and how much he loves Arthur and how much he was willing to invest in these old guys and all that stuff. But you also see Graham's character because he obviously has a close relationship with his sister, and you also see his character with his daughters. Yeah. And that melts her heart. Seeing, and this is something that, as I was watching the movie, this is what I tell people, young people, when they're starting to date or when they're asking me about stuff. And I say, if you want to know how a guy is going to treat you in 10 years, look at how he treats people now. Because as he's wooing you, he's gonna do all sort of stuff.
He's putting the lipstick on that pig.
But look at how he treats his mom. Look at how he treats children. Look at how he treats old people. Look at how he treats people who can't do anything for him. Look at how he treats those people. See, here's something that some women do. I'm not going to say all women do, but it's just something some women do for some reason. And guys do this too. I think Miles did it, and I think Amanda did it. But it's like we pick someone who's an awful person, but they're nice to us, and so that makes us feel special. Yeah. And it's almost like we friend zone the people who are nice to everybody. Because if they're nice to us and they're nice to everybody,
we're not special.
We're not really special.
Yeah.
But you have to understand, the guy who is nice to everybody, he's going to be nice to you in 10 years. Like he's a decent, good person. And you kind of see that character as just the whole stuff with the girls and the daughters and the awkwardness of how it changes that relationship. And changes how she perceives him and he her in the return. It's just an important part of, again, what are women looking for? They don't really want the bad boy, that what they want is someone who is kind and consistent and they see that sort of character.
But I don't think they want, not to pick on Mr. Rogers, because I think that's one of our movies we may do soon.
Yeah.
But they don't want Mr. Rogers either. They don't want safe. They don't want mild. They don't want meek. Because it was interesting, like during the day leading up to the introduction of Graham's daughters, they went out and she was sharing some things with him about her parents' divorce and about how she hadn't cried since then. And they said, the waiter came up and Amanda said, "Let's order." He's like, "What? Wait." Like, you're talking about something that can wait. Tell me, he's again inviting her to share his heart. But she's also saying, "You make me nervous." She is expecting him to be intimidated by her success because men are. She's writing this. She continues to write the ending before it even begins. But the similarity, again, going back to Miles and Graham, is their playfulness.
Yeah.
Miles is in the Blockbuster where you used to go to rent videos, which is how people used to watch movies before it just popped up magically on your TV. And he's, you got to hear this soundtrack, bop, bop, da, bop, a scabba-doo, and, talking and just being goofy, and he's fun. And the same thing with Graham, he's Mr. Napkin Face. He's going into the tent with his daughters, and it's obvious. And I wrote the dad, Graham as a dad, made his daughters little princesses. Their mom had died 2 years ago, and his life was centered around them. And it seems like he was going to the pub because he was a pretty miserable dude to that point. And his life was his family. But he played with his daughters. He goofed around and would make jokes, but he was safe. There's a way to be safe, but not boring.
Yeah.
As you mentioned, the reason the bad boys, I think, appeal, and again, here I am stepping into a woman's brain. I'm a nurse, so I've worked in nursing for 20 years because they want to go on the adventure. They don't want to be the adventure. The adventure isn't getting them in bed or getting them to marry us or going out on a date. The adventure is, hey, this is something I love to do. This is something you love to do. Let's go do it together.
Yeah.
And then the playfulness, in all the rom-com movies, you see the pattern is they're with a stiff, somebody who's not playful, who's not much fun. And then they experience somebody who's a little more fly by the seat of his pants. And that is appealing because they like playful. They like joy.
Yeah. Someone who makes them laugh.
Yeah.
And laughter, I said this to, I forget where I heard it, but, so we can cut this later if you want, but
I don't know what's about to happen.
I know, right? So for women, the same muscles that they use in intimacy are the same muscles they use when they laugh. Okay. So laughter is an amorous thing to a woman. Like it actually activates a very romantic feeling sexually, even with a woman. And I told a man one time, because he and his wife were having some problems in the bedroom. And I said, make her laugh. And he goes, what? I said, stop taking it so freaking seriously. Like you guys are taking, like your guys are in the bedroom, like, okay, we got to be serious and sexy. And I'm like, just make her laugh, tell her jokes. Make fun of stuff.
This should be fun.
This is fun. Like, and I said, what? And then later on, he was like, dude, I had never thought about that. But he said it totally changed the whole vibe. And, it relaxes the woman, like all of that stuff. And all that to say is, that's a great point, is that they both were goofy. They made them laugh. And I do want to say this about Miles. It doesn't say this, but something that I've noticed in my own life, I cry more than I ever did. I don't know. It's just this thing, right? But for me, I cry more than I ever did because I've been through a lot of tragedy, more than I did when I was 20. Okay. And I'm not saying hadn't gone through any tragedy by 20. I'm just saying I've been through a lot more in the last 20, 30 years. And so it's like a groove that's well worn to tears in that sense. Like I can get to tears a lot faster. I've been there. Like I know where that is. And I think that's part of what's going on with Graham. With Graham. That's part of what's going on with Graham is, when you had a wife who's died, like, I'm sorry, that's going to hit you, and it's going to affect you. And that makes him, I'm not going to say more sensitive, but it definitely makes him quicker to grieve in a certain sense, because he's familiar with grief. Grief is like when you have thankfully my wife, I haven't had a spouse who's died. But when someone close to you has died, like that grief never really goes away. It's always right there, and you can touch it pretty much at any point. Sometimes it surprises you at how quickly it hits you. It doesn't say that's why he's a crier. I mean, it kind of makes fun of him for it. But again, that's part of his journey. He had to learn how to love again. He had to learn how to do, that was kind of part of his journey. And Miles's journey, Miles had a journey too. He had to learn how to choose someone who wasn't the sexy actress. He had to fall in love with the real leading lady,
right.
the person who was going to treat him right. So all of that.
And I think that the Graham arc, it gets completed on their last night. Amanda's going to leave England the next day. And she says, here's option one is we try this long distance thing. And in 6 months we're miserable and we're fighting all the time. And it sucks. She's like, there is another option. And he gets excited. It's like, we just say, this was fun. This was an England thing, and go on with our lives. And he doesn't like that answer. And so he says, there's something you need to know.
I have another scenario for you.
Good.
I'm in love with you. I apologize for the blunt delivery. But as problematical as this fact may be, I am in love with you. And I'm not feeling this because you're leaving, and not because it feels good to feel this way, which, by the way, it does, or did, before you went off like that. I can't figure out the mathematics of this. I just know I love you. Can't believe how many times I'm saying it. And I never thought I'd feel this way again, so that's pretty phenomenal. And I realize I come with a package deal, 3 for the price of 1, and my package, perhaps in the light of day, isn't all that wonderful, but I finally know what I want, and that in itself is a miracle. And what I want is you.
I wasn't expecting I love you. Can you not look at me like that? I'm trying to find the right thing to say.
I think if the obvious response doesn't immediately come to you, we should just talk about something else.
And he says, I didn't know if I would ever feel like this. I didn't know that this would ever happen. That flip side, that grief that just was right under the surface. And again, stepping into our women's brains here, I think women long for that. To have a man say, I love you. I don't know how it's going to work. The math doesn't add up. I know I'm a burden. Like, he's not coming in like, hey, you're lucky to have me, baby. He's like, I'm complicated. It's not easy. All I know is I want to do it with you. I want a life with you. I want to live with you. I want adventure with you. I want playfulness with you. And she's not ready, right? She's like, I don't know what the right response is.
Yeah.
There was a Friends episode where they're like, Ross, you need to tell her you love her. And so he runs down at the airport and he's like, I love you. She says, Thank you.
Right?
Not the response you're looking for.
Yeah.
Because she is still, that last piece hasn't quite clicked for her yet.
Yeah. And so for the sake of the movie and good writing, but also as an example to us, people in this movie, they had to come to these decisions on their own. They had to come to the decision of love. Like if you really watch through the movie, like she was like, okay, we can just be done. You know, you've got kids, you're trying to protect this whole thing, but he chooses to show up at her door. Right. And then they have this amazing night kind of thing where he tells her he loves her. Well, she's not ready. She has to leave and she's in the car before she starts crying finally. And you come like they each come to this point of decision without being pressured by the other one. And I think that's a huge theme at the end. Iris had to think that Miles was going back to the actress. And so she had to make a decision about Jasper there at the end, she wasn't thinking, well, I'm choosing Miles over you. She was just thinking, I have to say no to toxic. I have to say no to this toxic thing. Just for me, even if I'm alone, I have to say no to this. And Miles had to say no to the actress, right? Like they each had to come to this moment of decision on their own. And I think that's an important element of love, that we have to come to this decision, not manipulated, not coerced. We have to come to it on our own, and we own the decision, you know?
And I'm about 3 years late in telling you this, but nevertheless, I need to say it. Jasper, you have never treated me right, ever.
Oh, babe.
Shush! You broke my heart. You acted like somehow it was my fault, my misunderstanding, and I was too in love with you to ever be mad at you, so I just punished myself for years. But you waltzing in here on my lovely Christmas holiday and telling me that you don't want to lose me whilst you're about to get married somehow newly entitles me to say, it's over. This twisted, toxic thing between us is finally finished. I'm miraculously done being in love with you. I've got a life to start living. And you're not going to be in it.
Darling.
Now I've got somewhere really important to be, and you have got to get the hell out. Now!
What exactly has got into you?
I don't know. But I think what I've got is something slightly resembling gumption.
And there had been a scene, and it was the conversation with Miles, and where she's sharing with all the toxic stuff that he had put her through. And then she had a line in there that she said, one day you'll get away, you'll hear different voices, and little pieces of your soul will finally come back. Mm. And that's the gospel. Yeah. When Jesus came in Luke 4, before he started his ministry, he read from Isaiah 61. I'm the Lord's anointed, here to bind up the brokenhearted. And when you see someone whose heart is fully alive, you see a woman who's full of gumption, who doesn't need some toxic thing, not even a relationship, it's a thing. And she has the strength to say, I deserve better. You're not treating me right, and you're not a part of my life anymore. Because she's wholehearted. She's fully alive.
Yeah.
And then contrast Amanda as she was driving away, and she cries for the first time in decades. And the trailer voice comes on and says, Amanda Woods, welcome back. And that, it's like her heart is fully alive, and she knows what she wants, and she can pursue it freely with the strength to be vulnerable.
I love the whole part with gumption. I love the whole part where she finally says, I think I got it. I got it. I have gumption. I've got it. But again, like we said, Arthur saw it first.
Yeah.
And Miles saw it. They both saw it. So what can we learn from men as this? With, you mentioned daughters. So there's something I say to my daughters, because sometimes they walk in the room and I'm like, I'm going to have to get a gun to, drive all the boys away from you, or, I'm just messing with them or something. And then I'll say, you know what? I'm going to do something better. I'm going to teach you who you are. And then you can make that decision.
Yep.
In other words, like, what's better, for me to come in and drive all the boys away, or for me to teach her how to have gumption? Like, why don't you have gumption? Why don't you know your worth and your value? And again, why do women love this movie? Is because they need men and women, other women, but they need a community, which Iris had around her, because it wasn't just Arthur. There were the old guys, and then there was Miles. Like, she had, all of a sudden she had this community around her that said, no, you're a leading lady. And they kept saying it. No. And Miles treated her like a leading lady. He wrote her a song, which I love. Like, he's like, oh, I know I'm writing Arthur's song, but I wrote you a song too. And you could see just her eyes light up. Like, no one had written her a song. Like, Jasper wasn't going to write her a song. Like, that's just ridiculous. And so that's what women need. They need to be told, you can do this. You have worth. I'm impressed. You're interesting. Like you said, you're lovely. Like, you're so interesting. I so want to hear what you have to say. Like, that's intimacy to a woman. And so therefore, I just think that's a great part of the movie, where she finds that gumption, but she found it in community. She found it in a community of people around them. And we as men need to be a part of that community, and to put our girls and our daughters and our wives in a community like that, where they are celebrated.
Over the weekend, we watched Ralph Wrecks the Internet.
I love that movie.
And in that, all the Disney princesses are there, and they're trying to find out if the Vanellope was a princess. And they said, oh, does everybody expect a big, strong man to come and save you? She's like, yes. Oh, she is a princess. Because when we being me and you, because I do think that many films and many things in society say, no, women are sort of weak and helpless and need a man to come and save them.
Right.
So when we say women need men, it's not in the sort of to rescue them or to protect them or to, be the big savior of the world for them. It's to live life together. God said it's not good for man to be alone, and probably not for women either, because we're sort of two sides of the same coin. And that invitation, we talked about, it's this invitation to life, to adventure, to the fact that I don't need to save, like my wife, I don't need to rescue her.
No.
What I want to do is see her fulfill as much of her potential as possible. And so sometimes that means I don't work as much so she can work, and I don't get upset when she's working late. And that's not always easy, because we do crave attention and affection, and it's a partnership. But when we talk about what to take away from it, it's like you were saying, is engage them, see them, and do something sort of extravagant. My buddy, he got quite a chunk from the stimulus money recently, and he sent us this picture of a bourbon steakhouse meal, and it's down in Florida, so none of us are there. But we said, you know what, dude? You should take your wife, because bourbon is something that he's been enjoying lately, but she hasn't been a part of it. Mm. And she would also say, I'm not worth $150 dinner. But for him to say, yeah, I got us tickets. Let's get dressed up. Let's do this. I'm inviting you because I enjoy it. I think you'll enjoy doing this with me. Let's go together. The other piece of that is, what is something she would love to do? Whether it's go hiking. For my wife, she loves the sun and being warm. So So we do something like go to St. Thomas for her birthday
Right.
and not go somewhere cold and snowy.
Yeah.
And what makes her heart come alive? And go do that.
Yep.
And don't worry about how much it cost. Because if you're reflecting Jesus' love for us, then that's something that God's going to support.
Well, and it doesn't necessarily, just to clarify, it doesn't have to cost money. It can, but when we say it doesn't matter what it costs, that could be time. That could be money, but it probably will cost you something. It will cost you time to think about it. And like I'm saying, all of this is celebrating her and making her feel seen, sometimes seen anew, sometimes seen not for the first time, but there's a moment in WandaVision, I know you watched it too, but there's a moment in WandaVision at the end where he said, "Oh, you got to turn on the light." And she's like, you never read that. He goes, "No, I just wanted to see you." I mean, I'm sorry. That moment is so romantic, right? That one line, it wasn't graphic or sexual. It was just, "I just want to see you." But it's so intimate. And that's just a big part of why I think women love this movie, and the fact that they had to, again, choose to come together. And once they all did finally come together, do you have another clip with like Miles or anything? So once they do all sort of come together, because Miles says no to his toxic relationship and shows up, and he's like, "Oh, I'll come to where you are. Let's have, New Year's. I've never been there." So at the end, and we see this in a lot of movies, and we've commented on it. You know what the reward is at the end of the movie? Is community. That's what I do love about that scene. Like there's the practical side of me, which isn't a very big side, by the way. I'm not the most practical guy in the world, but there's the practical side of me that's going, how did they make these long distance relationships work? Like they didn't really resolve that for me. But at the same time, like, I love that last scene, because the last scene says, you know what they have? They have more than just a romantic couple. Right. Now they have family. Now the reward is there as they come to the truth of who they really are, as they come to the truth of gumption, the truth of welcome back, Amanda, the truth of I can love again, the truth of Miles' truth of I don't have to have the actress to have her leading lady. Like when they come to their own truth, and they get a family. They get what they've all been longing for. And the girls are there, and they're playing around, and they're dancing, and they're being goofy together. And it's just a great end to the movie.
Yeah. It's about being seen and finding belonging.
Yep.
And yeah, I agree. I said, wow, that's a great movie, even for a romantic comedy. So this has been Men at the Movies, talking about The Holiday with Paul McDonald and Britt Mooney. Check us out on our website. We have menatthemovies.com, and on Facebook and Instagram. We got some fun stuff planned for the next few months, and you'll definitely see some stuff. You don't want to miss out on it. Hope you join us next time here on the Men at the Movies podcast.
Something inside has been awakened. I can no longer be who I was before. But if I am no longer who I was, who am I to be?